Hi there, and welcome to a new episode of Impact Talks. Today we have an incredible guest, Martin Borgmeier. He's a professional long driver and world record holder of the fastest golf ball speed ever recorded. Martin, I've tried a couple of introductions. It went completely wrong. I got this one right. So how about you introduce yourself and tell the people where they might know you from?
Well, you already said the most important parts, I guess. So I'm a long drive golfer. That means I'm actually doing the sport of long drive, which is an individual sport, right? Mostly played in the US. I mean, in Europe, I'm from Germany, I'm from Munich. It's not that popular yet, but we're working on it. And obviously my base is in the US actually during the season. And all I do all day long is basically try to hit the golf ball as far as possible and as straight as possible, because we do not only have to hit it far, but we also have to hit it straight. But the difference to golf is that long drive is very adrenaline driven. So that means what we try to do is we really try to amp up and go out there and smash our six balls. And well, when you play golf, you mostly try to manage, contain your adrenaline, right? So it's a little bit of a different approach, but with the same equipment. And most people from Germany also know me from the TV show The Mole, which has been broadcasted this summer, which I won. And well, that's basically the two parts I'm popular for. And you mentioned it. I hit the fastest ball of the planet in March this year, and we probably go deeper into this later, but ball speed also eventually means distance, so it's your number one potential to hit a far ball.
When I started looking into you, especially with my team, we started uncovering quite a lot that has nothing to do with golf. Like the way you manage your Instagram is so interesting. You have a background as well, maybe not golf related. I guess that's what I'm wondering. Could you explain to listeners like how it all started? What was your education like? How did you end up in becoming an athlete? And yeah, tell the listeners more.
Yeah, that's a long story. I probably have to kick off when I was like 9 years old, because that was the very first time when I touched a golf club, right? Actually, a colleague of my dad took him with me to the driving range in Paderborn, where I was born, which is my hometown. And once I touched this golf club, I loved it. Once I hit the first ball up in the air, I loved it. So I was really hooked, and I wanted to go and play golf actually. And back in the days, that was like in the 2000s, so early 2000s, 2001 maybe. And back in the days, it was not too common for a young guy to want to play golf, right? You want to play soccer, you want to, don't know, play basketball, whatnot, but golf is pretty uncommon. But I did it, I loved it. And back in the days, there was like maybe five juniors in my home club in Paderborn. I mean, today it's completely different, a little bit different. We still have a long way to go, but it's a little different. And well, then played for a good 6, 7 years on a fairly competitive level back in the days. I played up to the national championships and always dreamed of becoming a professional, right? Because that was the era of Tiger Woods, and he really shaped how I felt about golf and why I wanted to become a professional. And well, all of a sudden I had my first girlfriend, had my first motorcycle, and well, golf was not the sexiest thing to do, right? So well, I got driven away a little bit, but started to play basketball. And because at the age of 16, when you start to play basketball and you didn't go through basketball school, so a lot of the technique and everything, you're lacking a little bit of technique actually. Um, you got to make that up somehow. And that's how I got in the fitness world. And by working on my physique, working on my strength, my jumps, and everything to have some advantage regarding, well, playing basketball, right? Yeah, I came back at the age of 20, 21, 22 when I was starting my job, because in the meanwhile, what I did is I started dual studies, and I was doing a bachelor's degree in business administration, and I started to work at an IT company. And all of my colleagues, all of my customers play golf, right? But they were like, don't know, 45, 50 plus years old. And they were like, hey, Martin, we heard that you pretty good at golf. Why don't you come play with us? And well, then I went to my basement, checked my golf clubs. They were way too short and pretty old, but I gave it a try and I still had it. And actually that mixture of technique from the old days and the physical part I gained by playing basketball and working on my physique was really a good mixture. And I felt like, okay, I can hit the ball pretty far away, but I didn't really know how good you have to be to do a long drive, because I heard of these long drivers, especially in the US. But as you don't know how far is far, how fast is fast at that point, I was basically trying. So I played my first event in 2017, which was the German Long Drive Championship. And as an amateur, I came second because I hit all balls out of bounds in the final, right? That's how it went. And all these pros approached me at that event and said, like, Martin, you really have to try this. Seriously, you're such a talent. And I actually thought like, well, if I want to do this and if I really want to shoot for it, I want to do it, well, all out, right? I really want to become a pro, and I really want to show the world what's possible and show myself what I'm capable of, right? So I really worked my ass off over that winter for like 6 months, played my first European event. Well, made it to the finals at least, but didn't win. And then in my second event, I won my first European event, and that really showed me that I'm fairly competitive on that level. And then I got more into these numbers and everything, how fast balls need to be, how I can optimize my launch to hit it further, and so on. So I was really digging deep into it. Reached out to my coach, who was also the coach of the current world champion back in the days, which is Lee Cox in the UK, in London, and started working with him. And well, the rest is history. Then I won the European tour, so the entire tour, the Order of Merit. Then made it to the US, made 3 TV events, and came second in Rochester. And then this year I actually wanted to become a world champion. That was my plan actually for this year, but then we didn't have events, right? It was a completely different story. And the first kickoff was in March, when I hit the fastest ball of the world in a simulator in West Palm Beach on an Instagram live. So it's really credible what I did there, because that simulator was actually the same one the current world champion used to hit his 230-mile ball. And that was the first ball ever recorded over 230. And then that March, I broke that one with 231.9. So that was a credible one, and it was on an Insta Live. So that was the only good part of 2020 in terms of long drive for me, actually. So let's see what the future brings. Let's hope for some amazing events in 2021 and then attack again.
I mean, it does sound like you're kind of starting to get into the prime of your career. 2017, you said 21, 22. How old were you when you started 2017?
That was at the age of 26. Yeah, 26.
26.
Now I'm 29. Yeah.
So how does it work in the world of golf? Obviously, I'm a newbie, but interested. So you're now in your 20s. In my head, that sounds like you're very, very young in the world of golf. So you are still way ahead going into your prime, or am I wrong?
Well, in golf, you see everything. So you see people on an extremely high level early in their 20s. You see people at 50 plus that are still crazy fast. And that's what matters in long drive, right? It's about speed. When you don't have the speed, you're not competitive. That's the very basis. And the rest is about launch, and the rest is about mental strength during the events, basically. But we see everything. So we have guys like Cal Berkshire, who's like 23 years old and became a world champion last year. And we have guys like Eddie Fernandez, who's 50 and still swings at 150 miles per hour. So what we have in long drive is we have the open division, which is any age. And then we have the Masters division, which is actually the seniors who don't want to be called seniors, right, at 45 and plus. So you have these two divisions. but still some of the guys from the Masters division and the best ones still are very competitive in the Open division. So I don't see any limits there. I've not seen any decrease in performance yet. It's only getting better. So that's why I don't care too much about age as common in other sports like soccer.
That's good to hear. And then another question that I had is, so you were telling about your story and coming up, and obviously, you were studying, you said, and then you started getting back into golf. So did you ever have a proper job, or did you study and went straight into golf?
I did actually for a pretty long time. For 8 years, I was working in IT sales for a fairly large IT enterprise. And in the meanwhile, I was also in studying a master's degree in parallel to my job, which I graduated in, which is a master of science in business psychology. So, but that was all way prior to that first event. So it almost felt like when I played that event, that German long drive event, that almost felt like a second chance for a professional career in sports, because I have ever always dreamed of becoming a golf professional, right? But now I actually had a different path of my career in the IT world, which I liked, but it was not like it was the best in the world, right? But competing and doing what you love and smashing golf balls is the best you can do, at least for me.
So coming back to reflecting a little bit about your journey, you know, you started coming back into it in your 20s, but also your first championship, then 2017, we're talking about you being 25, 26. So there's this gap happening. How come it took you so long to get back into it? Why? Obviously, you dreamed about becoming this potential golfer, professional, instead of doing IT. Was there like some comfort that you got stuck in, or how come you didn't do it on the side? What was happening there? Why did it take you so long?
Well, the very honest answer is I didn't know it existed. So that's actually it, because there's two different sports. There's golf and there's long drive, right? And for a long time, I knew that there are long drivers out there that had to hit a very far ball, right? But I didn't know it's a proper sport and you can actually make a living of it. And that's what I figured when I played this first event, because the professionals came up to me and were like, Martin, seriously, you have to try doing this professionally. You can seriously earn money by doing so. And that was the very first moment when I realized, oh, seriously, that is a career path I didn't know of. And that's when I started to actually follow that path, because beforehand I didn't know, and all I knew about was golf. And I mean, that was far off, seriously far off, because there are so many people out there in that world, and I had a very, very big check mark behind trying to become a professional golfer. Now I am technically, but in the long drive world. So that's the difference, and that's why I was actually following that as soon as I knew I could do something like that.
Maybe a quick question, because I can imagine this will pop up in the questions, but can you give a short, like 1 minute overview of exactly what golf is and exactly what long drive is?
Yeah. So golf is actually, as you know, a tournament. Or in golf, you play a tournament that is 18 holes. So you play from a tee box onto a fairway, from a fairway onto a green, and from there you put it into the hole. And your score is what matters, right? You have a scorecard, you mark your score, and your final score is the only thing that matters. There are no pictures on the scorecard, right? And you're doing, as you play 18 holes, you're doing that in a pretty long time. It takes like 4 to 5 hours to actually play a round of golf. So you actually have to contain your adrenaline, try to play every shot as every shot counts. You play every shot by itself, right? That's what you do in golf. In long drive, it's the exact opposite. So you're at one point, at one tee box. You have a grid right in front of you. You have to hit to qualify a drive, right? A drive is actually, that's what we call a shot, right? Because we use a driver. That's how the largest club is called. And in long drive, we hit 6 balls in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And the best one in the grid that hit the grid counts. So let's say I hit a ball. The first one goes OB left outside the grid, lands outside the grid. The next one lands at 330 and rolls till 345. So the 345 is your number because we go by total distance, not by carry distance, right? And let's say the third one goes OB right, the next one as well, the next one as well. The fifth ball goes straight down the middle at 360, rolls out to 360, and the last one goes OB left. Then 360 is my number, right? So what I can actually do is I can actually work my way into that set. That's how we call the set. Like the 6 balls are one set, and you mark your number, and there you go. That's about it. In 2 minutes 30, you're done with your set. Usually we play like multiple sets per round. That's 4 to 5 sets, but that's way less than 4 hours playing golf, right? And it's on a completely different basis as we seriously swing as fast as possible. And we actually do not try to control our game, but go all out and hit that one perfect shot. That's what we're looking for in long drive.
So then, for me, when I'm hearing this, then for me it sounds almost like it's a game of the strongest kind of person has benefit there, because the harder you hit, the better. In comparison to golf, where it's all about the score. Is that kind of correct?
It kind of is. It definitely helps when you're strong, right? So the stronger you are and the faster you are, the more potential you have to hit a long ball. But there's a little bit of technique involved as well. I would say it's 80-20%, right? It's 80% technique, and the rest, the 20%, are your physical abilities. But remember, this, for example, is a golf club, right? We're using. So you have this right here is the club face, and you have to hit this sweet spot right in the middle of the face to have perfect, that's what we call a smash factor, to have perfect or maximum force applied to the golf club, to the golf ball, right? So if you hit it a little at the toe or at the neck, the force applied won't be as big, so the ball won't go as far. So you have to be very precise as well. So it's not only about power, but power perfectly applied. That's the idea about it. And there are quite a few strong players, obviously, but there's also like 170 tall guys weighing 75 kilos that smash the ball an amazing distance. So there's no limits to your physique, but obviously it helps when you have long levers, when you're pretty strong and you work on your body to achieve higher speeds. Yeah.
Do you think that at one point, especially considering the precision, and you were just showing for the listeners like a plate on this golf stick, and then you have to hit it right in the center of that plate, do you think that there's like a balance where at one point you're too bulky to do long drive?
Well, I guess so, at least for my physical constitution. I mean, there's others that are so big and so bulked up, and they still hit it amazingly far. But I guess the more you weigh and the more you bulk, the harder it is to remain flexible, right? Because you have to hit these certain positions, right? Especially you have to remain flexible in your torso and in your hips. And in my experience, the more I bulk up, the more issues I have with flexibility. And I always stick to my mobility routine, for example, to not lose that flexibility, because it's absolutely key to reach these certain positions, right? But there's always exceptions. I mean, there's players that bulked up like crazy because they thought that's their path, right? And they did absolutely well. I guess there's, because this sport only exists for about 40 years in the US, there's still a lot to learn. There's still a lot to explore. And my ball speed number is by far not the limit that can be achieved. I guess very soon, over the next 10 years, we will see 240 ball speed. We will see 245 ball speed. I think it's definitely going to happen, because 10 years back, the people thought the limit is 220, and now we're at 231.9. So I think the more experience we gain, the better every athlete will become.
But do you think that has to do with like you? Well, does it have to do with you and the way you train? Because obviously, like you can see that on the Instagram for the listeners. Like you're definitely not like some fat old guy who's playing golf. Like
Yeah.
you're pretty bulky, and so do you think that has to do with how you training your muscles, or maybe the technology? Like, what's the balance there? Do you think the golf clubs are improving? Like Nike is improving with the running and stuff like that, and they created these shoes, and then that Eliud Kipchoge, I think he got under the 2 hour marathon mark. So do you think with golf, like long drive, it's the same, like those sticks, the things, the tools you're using are getting so much better, that's why you're hitting it faster? Or what do you think the balance is there?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So first of all, these clubs, these heads are
Clubs,
complete.
that's the
Yeah,
word, clubs, sorry.
they're called clubs. Yeah, this is the shaft, right? This is the club head, and the whole thing is the club. So these clubs are regulated. So these clubs are all conforming to the rules of the USGA, the United States Golfers Association. So we stick to those rules, right? So our equipment is completely golf conforming, because I'm getting asked that question all the time, especially in the golf world. Like, yeah, you're using different clubs. No, we're not. You can use this club too if you want to. It's completely conforming, because technology-wise, this club face is only allowed to give you a 1.5 smash factor. What that means is your club speed can only be multiplied by 1.5 in terms of your ball speed. So for example, when you swing at 100 miles per hour, so this object, the club head, moves 100 miles per hour through the air, hits a golf ball, boom. The only smash factor, so the force applied, is not allowed, must not exceed 1.5. So the ball is only allowed to travel with 150 miles per hour. So that basically limits the club's performance. But what you can always adapt, obviously, and that's what's going to change a lot, and that's what all these companies are working on, is forgiveness. So that means the sweet spot is growing and growing and growing. So in the future, maybe you don't have to be that precise and hit the very center of the face all the time. So maybe you hit over here or over here, is just as much force applied as the center of the face. So that's what can be adapted, and that's what all these companies are working on. But those clubs are regulated. So that means, actually, in terms of peak performance, those clubs cannot do a lot. What they can do is they can reduce spin rates, for example, because that's a crucial point I have not mentioned yet, because we're sending that object with a certain launch angle and a certain spin rate. And depending on those numbers, the ball goes further or doesn't. And if you can manipulate that spin rate as good as possible to reach the furthest distance, and that's also something the club can help you with, you're going to hit it further. It's not going to be faster, but you're using your potential better. So that's the whole idea behind it. And well, these shafts as well, as they're kicking, right? The shafts we're using are not like super hard. These shafts are kind of whippy.
That's
So
very flexible. Yeah, I didn't
super
expect it.
flexible.
Yeah.
So they give you a little bit of more whip. So maybe these shaft companies come out with something, because these shafts are not like regulated in terms of this or that whip is allowed. You're actually kind of free, anything that technology allows you to. That's the only part of the golf club, so the shaft, which could be improved in terms of technology. But these shafts are so good already. I don't know if that's going to change a lot. But well, you never know what's going to happen. Maybe they find out some new material that gives more kick or applies more force or whatever. But what's going to change a lot is that people figure out how to practice and how to train to peak, because that's something that's not been explored as much, especially because it's very individual, right? And well, I guess that people will figure out what the perfect preparation for an event is to peak, and people are going to be that much faster, because that's something I've explored over the last like 2.5, 3 years. And I guess I figured out a way for me to be as good as possible and as fast as possible in competition. But there's always room for improvement, because it's something you have to test, you have to try, right? Especially nutrition, especially sleeping habits, especially training and workout habits before the event, and how you peak for a certain time during the day. That's something that's going to be explored a lot more, and people will find out a lot more. And as soon as they apply it, they will break records.
But so what you're telling right now is the sport is 40 years old, but yet there is no precise way on how to prepare for the sport. Because
Well, there obviously is a way, right? And people do it. Myself, I'm doing this as well. How you peak and how you cycle training and practice routines, yes. But when you want to squeeze out that last percent, right? It's about timing. It's about the small things that people couldn't test yet. And I think they're going to find out a lot more. The golf world has changed so much as well, because a lot of the golfers also look into long drive and feel like, well, some of these moves they do, some of the training they do might be relevant for golf as well, to hit the ball longer, right? Because statistics say that the longer you hit the ball in golf as well, the more prize money you're going to make on a pro tour. So all these golfers now look at long drive and feel like, oh, maybe I could copy some of these moves or adapt some of these moves to my sport, because they don't want to be as wild as the long drivers are, but they want to look into it. And over the last 5 years, the athleticism on the golf in the golf world has changed so much, and that sport has been for, don't know, 200 plus years, right? So it's constantly evolving, it's constantly growing. So I guess people will find out a lot more.
how has the sport changed in, let's say, your perspective? Because in your perspective, we're talking like 20 years now at least.
Yeah.
So how has it changed for you looking to when you were really young and now?
Yeah, so when I was young, Tiger Woods was the number one guy in the golf world, and he already changed the game so much, because he was the first guy that actually went to the gym and did some physical training. Yeah, because these other guys were drinking, smoking, and eating McDonald's on the golf course, and just had a bit of fun. And because they were the best at it, they earned a lot of money, right? And then all of a sudden, there was this guy who was very dedicated, went to the gym, worked on his physique, hit the ball way, way, way longer than all the other guys. So that means, imagine if you don't know golf, imagine a 400-yard long hole, right? If you smash the first ball 350 yards down there, you have 50 yards left. That is a a crazy difference to a guy who hits it 260 yards and has 140 yards left, right? So the proximity to the hole when you hit that approach shot is going to be so much closer when you're 50 yards away compared to 140 yards away. And that made all the difference, because the longer in golf, you have 14 clubs, right? 14 different clubs. This one I just showed you, this one is the longest club, right? The driver. But you also have different irons and different wedges, we call them, with different face angles. We call it loft, right? Different angles of the face. So the ball goes a longer or shorter distance. So you can actually, by your club choice, you can manipulate how long you hit the ball, right? And the shorter that club is, the more precise you are. So that means the less club you need for that approach shot, the closer you're going to hit it, and the less shots you're gonna need, right? Because when you hit it this close to the hole, you're just gonna tap it in and make a three, right? Which is called a birdie. If you hit it like, don't know, 15 meters away or 15 yards away, you're gonna need at least two putts most of the time, right? So statistics say the longer you hit it, the more prize money you're going to make, and that obviously correlates with your score. So that's been a huge change, because Tiger Woods was the first guy who actually worked on his physique and hit it way further. And now, since like 5 years, more and more people from college golf who play collegiate golf for, like, I guess they play 3 years, they are way, way, way faster than they've been 10 years ago. Because all everything that Tiger Woods has shown, that other athletes have shown, um, reveals movement patterns and things that coaches did not know before. So they look into all these swings and all these power sources they use and how they train, and adapt the same things with their pupils, right? So, and all of a sudden, all these college golfers who make it to the PGA Tour or to the big tours are way, way faster, way, way longer, and that has not stopped evolving. Yeah, especially now for the last 3 to 5 years, when they look more into long drive and all the moves we do. Because for a long time, the years before, long drive or whacking golf balls from in the eyes of a normal golfer had nothing to do with golf, because it was the let's call it this, golf is a very skilled game, and it's not about hammering a ball, right? It's about skill and how to hit the ball close and everything, very traditional. But all of a sudden people realize that it can be both, right? You need to be skilled, but the longer you hit it, the closer you hit it, the less strokes you need. So that's what actually changed over the last years.
Why do you think for 200 years nothing was happening, or like close to nothing if you compare it to what Tiger Woods introduced to the game, and then suddenly Tiger Woods like walks in and tells people, "Hey, if you exercise, you're going to be better." Like what happened those 200 years?
It's a good question. I don't know, not been there, but I mean, there's been big players too. Obviously, guys like Gary Player, Ben Hogan, Sam Snead, all these old guys, Jack Nicklaus, who were very, very competitive. But the difference was that now you have all these radar systems, camera systems, and everything, so you can make things measurable. So we don't know right now. We have no idea if Ben Hogan back in the days was swinging the club 100 miles per hour or 120. We don't know exactly. We can guess from pictures and videos, right? But as technology evolved, we can make things measurable and show things, right? Plus, at the same time, what changed was technology. Oops. And then at the same time, what changed was technology for drivers, technology for balls. Back in the days, they were using balls that didn't go half the distance, or they wouldn't go half the distance today. Because, for example, what they introduced, I don't know if you've seen that, the golf balls, I can show you one if you want to. They have these dimples all over you have these dimples all over the cover. And that actually, people had to figure out that that's the most aerodynamic way to make the ball go the furthest distance, right?
Really?
Back in the days, a golf ball looked like a baseball, more or less, right? And they had feathers in them, so it was a completely different ballpark. So everything evolved at the same time with technology, and Tiger Woods was at the right place with the right mindset at the right time, I guess.
What do you think are the most innovative tech things that you're using currently to improve your ball game?
What's crazy is the thing in the background. That's my golf simulator, which uses a high-speed camera. So this is a foresight system that uses a 10,000 frames camera. So I put down a ball, I can smash a ball into that screen, and my projector up there projects the image or the path the ball would have flown onto that screen. So I can practice indoors as I would be outdoors. It's exactly the same, especially in Munich. It's crazy because Right now, it's probably 2 degrees Celsius outdoors, so it's impossible to practice, especially for me. You cannot go for speed or do crazy long drive things outdoors when it's that cold, right? Um, it's exactly the same as you wouldn't do a 100-meter sprint outdoors when it's 2 degrees Celsius. That's crazy, right? You wouldn't do that, and I can do the same thing indoors. And that camera is so precise. It's crazy when you feel it for the first time as a golfer. You hit a ball, it shows the way the ball would have flown, and you feel like, yeah, that's right. That's about right. Yeah, it's so good. It seriously is. I mean, these, especially over the last years, these systems got so much more affordable, because in the very beginning they were like they cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right now, you can get such a setup for 15,000 and less. So, and that's pretty affordable for what it can do. It's really good.
So you have this setup, but you need obviously outside of the 15K, you need the room space to
Yeah,
set it
sure.
up in. And then, do you think that that has contributed to you setting that world record? How often do you practice in it?
100%. Without it, it would not have been possible. 100%, because I practice every day. Because I'm at my office right now, so this is my sim in the background. On the other side of the camera is my office desk. So I'm basically bouncing back and forth between my office desk and the sim. So I can throw in a practice session here. I can work on a drill there. So it's very handy for me to use, because it's always here. And well, sometimes, especially when I'm working on something technically, because in the golf and long drive world, it's all about positions in your golf swing. Sometimes you need to practice a lot and hit like thousands of balls to make a minor change, because you're so used to the way you swing the golf club, right? And I mean, I've probably done a million swings over the last year. So a tiny change to that swing, because it's so um, repetitive, right? It's always the same. It takes a lot of time and effort, and that's stuff I do here. And I record videos, send them back to my coach, and he gives me the next instructions, basically. So that's how it works today. And without the setup, no way, not possible.
And so, how do you balance, maybe exercise wise, like how many times a day do you do the sim? But also, I assume you also have to go outside and test it in real life. So, how do you balance both, and how many times do you do those per day and throughout the year?
Yeah. So usually I do 1 to 2 sessions a day. So it depends. I
What's
try
a
to
session? A session is like an hour.
Yeah, it depends. So usually I don't go by time, because some things take longer, some things do not. But usually it's about 300 balls a day. So that takes between probably 3 and 7 hours, something like that, right? But it's not repetitively hitting balls. It's swinging, checking the camera, checking where the position was, going back, do the same thing over and over again. And once I feel like I nailed it, I repeat it over and over and over again. And that's how a session usually works. And I actually, because I practice quite a lot, I have to sometimes force myself for rest days, because you, to adapt things and to internalize things, you sometimes have to leave it alone. And well, I try to have at least one rest day a week. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. And regarding hitting outdoors, I mean, right now it's basically impossible. It doesn't make sense, because it's simply too cold. So you have like 3 to 4 months in Munich when I basically only practice indoors. But once or the closer it gets to the season, which usually starts end of April, latest by mid of March, I want to see a proper ball flight. I want to see a real ball flight, because these systems are great. They are. But I want to see proof that that's actually the way that ball flies, right? They're really good, and I trust them. But at some point, you want to see it, right? And usually, so what I did this year is mid March, I flew out to Turkey to practice. And because usually mid-March it's already like 20 degrees Celsius in Turkey, and that's okay. They have really nice courses over there, and I always have to check which driving ranges, because that's the area we practice at, right? Or I practice at a lot. That's basically an area full of golf balls, because everyone's hitting golf balls out there. And then sometimes in Munich, we have little robots. They collect the balls, bring them back, and you can shoot them out again. It's pretty cool. And that's the area you can basically practice. So you have your bucket of balls, put them down and smash one ball after the other and see how it works. And as I hit the ball pretty far away, most driving ranges in Germany are way too short, right? And most of the time behind the driving range is a hole or a tee box. So it's pretty dangerous to hit balls back there, because people could be hit, right? Or there's a street, or don't know, an airport or something. So there's not a lot of areas I can actually go all out, but then I can work on my iron game, which is the very basis of the golf swing still. And I'm working on a lot of irons as well. But in Turkey, I found a place I can perfectly practice, which is long enough. And my driving range here in Munich is also like 450 yards long. I've never seen a longer driving range, because to be honest with you, for most golf courses, it doesn't make sense to have such a big driving range, because it's wasted land basically, because there's like 5 people in the world that can hit it that far, right? Doesn't make sense. It's not profitable, but they have it. Sometimes they practice in the back also with groups and stuff, and I cannot hit obviously, but most of the time, and I have my time frames when I can practice in peace, is pretty cool.
Germany has a lot of nature, though. So, for instance, I visit Germany quite often, and I know there are like forests and just like pieces of land with grass, very hilly, of course. But isn't it possible for you to just get a piece of land or get a farmer to agree to have you play golf there, and then you have more than 450 yards?
Well, I don't need more, actually. I mean, it's a good idea. I've always dreamed of having my own driving range. Yes, absolutely. But I guess it's a question of funding, right? If it makes sense or not. But I know that some people are working on their private driving ranges, especially in the north of Germany. So I'm looking forward to seeing those soon. But well, the money they make is actually through golfers, obviously. So you always should have the opportunity for golfers as well to practice. Then you need greens. So the greens are the very, very shortcut area, right, with grass like 1 millimeter long. It's like when you see that, when you walk on a green, it's crazy. It's ridiculous how well those are made, and obviously maintaining those costs a lot of money. So I guess it's a question of funding and profitability, but I still dream of doing so.
How that's maybe something like interesting, because obviously you said you switched from your job to this. How did you know you could afford it? Like, how much? I know that obviously golf is huge, and I've been invited sometimes. They have in the Netherlands the KLM Open, but like, what are we talking about that an average competitor can make? Could you share that?
Yeah, sure. So, number one answer to your question is I didn't know. I had no idea. So when I started off, it was a side hustle, right? I did it next to my job, because all these tournaments were on the weekends. So what I did all day is from 9 to 5, I was working for my IT enterprise. And then I went out to the driving range and was hitting balls. And everything I've set up here, for example, it's not been, right? So I went to the driving range at -5 degrees and was hitting balls in the dark with floodlight on. So that's how it all started. But then step by step, when I won more tournaments, and these tournaments were up to 10,000 euros a tournament. So the minor ones and the bigger ones up to 40,000, and a World Long Drive Championship is $250,000 over there. So that's the prize money you make, right?
But so
But
when you compete, don't you have to pay to compete?
yeah, sure, you have to pay entry fees, but they're usually between 300 and 800 euros. right? So, and how I funded those was actually by my savings, right? It was my private money I've saved over the last 8 years, and I felt like it's the right way to invest in myself and just give it a go. So that's the actual answer, quite frankly, yeah.
But is
And
there also a runner-up money? Because I'm assuming
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. So usually the top four or top eight is being paid. So there's a breakdown for the prize money. Yeah, there is.
But so, in order for you to make this a career, let's say somebody's listening, thinking to make this a career, we're talking about somebody who can place consistently in the top four of every competition, or else it's just not worth making this like a profession.
Yeah, that's in Europe definitely. In the US, things are a little different. So obviously, and I'm very grateful to have those. Obviously, depending on my sponsors, right? So my clothing sponsor is Jay Lindeberg. My club sponsor is Callaway, and there's others I just signed with, gonna be announced in January. Yes, obviously, yeah. Without their help, it wouldn't be possible. But in the US, what they do, it's not too common in Germany, but in the US, what they do is most long drivers who cannot make a living off the prize money and sponsorship money only, they hit in charity events. So that means there's a charity golf event and they are standing on one tee box the whole day. And for every group of that golf tournament that comes by and plays that hole, they smash a drive, right? Or like three or four. And they ask these groups for a donation for the charity, and they keep a part of it, and that's how they make their money. And for the charity, it's good as well because they raise more money and they have some entertaining on site. So that's how it works over there usually.
Do you think, just out of interest, but like an average competitor, someone who's consistently placing like at the last spot where they pay number 8 or number 4 depending on the tournament, and does these like charities and sponsorships, I can only imagine there are so many people in golf, maybe also now slowly going into long drive. Do you think it's only for a few that can make this a profession and most of them will do it as a hobby?
Hopefully not in the future, right? So we try to develop the sport, and I mean, I'm trying to develop the sport myself. So the more tournaments we have, and it's not like it's always the same people that win. Usually not. It's like in golf, there's always someone different, right? It depends on the form of the day and everything. So it's not like there's this one guy and he wins every tournament. You always see a form, and usually the same guys play somewhere at the top, but it's not like the same guys wins over and over again. So hopefully over the next, like when we think long term, like over the next 10 years, we can hopefully grow the sport that much that one very important thing is probably TV presence, because what they do over in the US, they show Long Drive on Golf Channel because it's a, yeah, basically it's something different, right? It's the younger form of golf, the adrenaline driven form of golf. It's entertaining, it's actually a show. But you can also show long drive to an audience that has nothing to do with golf, because just like darts, what's happening, just imagine a long drive event like this. So you have the darts crowd. So people are cheering, drinking beer, and wearing weird costumes, right? And shouting, not shouting 180, but 400 for every 400-yard drive. And by that also comes money. Yeah, the more presence we have on TV, the more sponsorships will be, the more prize money will be, and so on and so on. And I believe this is not only something for a golf channel or a Sky Golf channel, but also for a general sports channel, because it's actually exactly the same. Everyone will understand player A beats player B because he was hitting it 4 yards further. It's not about golf rules like birdie, bogey, dogleg, water hazard, drop, and so on. It's not as complicated. It's super easy. It's super adrenaline driven. It's fast. It's athletic. People want to watch it. You can really show it in a nice way from behind, for example, when you film down the line. You see these tracers, how they follow the ball. You see it land in the grid. So the broadcast podcast is absolutely amazing. So what I'm working on is to set something up in Germany, basically all over Europe. We just started 1.5 years ago to take over the European tour and develop it, right? Because we think Europe deserves more. The sport is came over to Europe like 6-7 years ago, roughly, right? And I mean, the US is still 40, 35 yards ahead of us. Not yards, years, not yards, years ahead of us. But we're trying to catch up.
How has your education, because obviously you had quite a lot of studying as well involved, so how has your education contributed to everything you're doing right now, or was it just a waste?
No, absolutely not. I learned so much. It's like crazy. Also, my professional experience in IT, everything I'm doing, all these conversations I'm having, I actually it's pretty good to as an athlete to also have a background of everything that happens around you, right? And especially the business psychology part and the parts I could adapt to sports psychology really helped me to be successful in these events. So I think having a business foundation is always good, independent of what you're doing, because sooner or later you have to do something with business, right? I mean, I said I hope to be competitive 50 plus, but sooner or later you have to do with any terms of business. And for me, it was sooner because I started managing and running the European long drive games with my team. So that's where the business kicked in. And having the foundation really helps. But to be honest with you, quite frankly, um, in the end, everything's about doing things and making experiences. You cannot study being successful. You can form a basis, but the rest needs to be done by yourself. I mean, there's a lot of people out there with the best and most amazing degrees, right? When they're lazy, don't want to do something, they're not going for it, they won't go anywhere. Yeah, the degree is just a foundation, but it helped, and I think everything I've learned helped to become what I am right now.
Can you give some practical things, like practical tips, examples, case studies that you were actually doing from your studies or your job applying into this world?
Yeah, especially what's most important is actually routines. So when I'm preparing for an event, I always do it the same way, exactly the same way. So the last 14 days prior to an event have a certain schedule, and I always stick to it. And that's something that is actually the same in anything. Wherever you look at marketing, right? When you look at marketing and you have a logo, it actually, you can have the nicest logo of the world for a brand or whatever, right? If you don't use it repetitively and always use it and in the same way over and over again, people won't recognize it, right? It can be the best. Plus, simplicity. That's also something. Look at the most important, most successful logos out there. Look at Nike, look at Puma, look at Adidas, look at Apple. It's always very simplistic. The most simple things are usually the most successful. And that's also something that translates to the golf swing, because it's a very complex movement actually, but the simpler you try to execute it, and the simpler your swing thoughts are, and the more you've worked on it, like the last, let's say, 14 days prior to that, the more successful you're going to be. So that's something you can transfer from A to B to C. It's always the same anywhere, and that also applies to sports.
Actually, I want to get deeper into the practical applications, but it really hooks onto one of the questions I got from a team member. It had to do, so he's a golfer as well. And I'm just going to read this part. But so he says it's one of the most difficult things for him when he's had like a bad run, a poor round of shots. To recenter his focus, calm down, and put the previous bad shots out of his mind, and start over from scratch in a good way. So the question was, how do you do it? What's your process? And do you use these skills off the course as well?
Yeah. So that's actually something that completely changed my process once I started to do long drive. Because in long drive, it's not like every shot counts, it's like the one perfect shot counts. So that means everything you've done before doesn't matter. So what I do is when I hit a bad shot, I simply tee up and hit another ball. And what I've learned in long drive is applying quick fixes. So that means when I snap hook a ball OB left, for example, I have a quick fix to correct that with my next swing. But you cannot do it in golf. Absolutely cannot. But what you
Haven't you had it where you, like, let's say, miss four of the, it's six shots, right? So you miss four of the shots, and then
yeah.
you start getting worried, and you lose focus.
And I tell you one thing. The only thing that helps is proper preparation, because you can actually simulate events, and that's absolutely part of my routine before an event. So I always put down 6 balls or 8 balls depending on how many I hit. I set an alarm and I go through my set. I imagine the grid out there where I'm hitting, and I'm gonna be in that situation. Definitely, it's gonna happen. It's part of the game. But the more you go through that situation, the more experience you gain in that situation, the better you will be, and the more relaxed you will be when you're really in that situation. So it's actually proper preparation and simulation, because you're gonna know that feeling. You will be like, oh, okay, I've done this before, and it's like 100 times before. So when it's about golf, and you basically want to make every shot count, and well, get a bad break off your mind. To be very honest, when you play practice rounds, don't play practice rounds for fun. Imagine it's a tournament and actually simulate the tournament, including all the bad shots, and react to it. Because the more you go through that situation, it will always be there, especially in golf. There's no perfect. How many perfect balls do you hit per round? Like 2 or 3 balls. It's about your bad shots and making the bad shots as good as possible, actually. So having that on your mind, and the more you go through that situation, the better you will be when it's really on, and when it's like the fourth day and you're about to make that last putt for the win.
So you're visualizing a lot, from what I understand, right?
Yeah, well, it's
Or do you
yeah,
actually have, like, audience sounds playing, or how do you do it?
yeah. Actually, the audience sounds, or the crowd, I don't hear them too much, because you're that focused. So I am that focused when I'm hitting. It's crazy. But when I hit for the very first time on TV, I was so nervous, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's gonna be so crazy! Oh, what's gonna happen, right?" And then what happened is I hit that first ball. It was an amazing ball, and it went left, right, left. So that ball in the air went left, right, left, because it was a crazy crosswind, and I don't know what happened there, but it was absolutely pure. And I felt like that's going to be down the middle, but it was just OB right. And then I fucked up the whole set, to be honest with you, right? It happens, right? The more you go through that situation, the more relaxed you will be. And the next event, I was so relaxed, because I felt like, okay, actually, it's exactly the same. I've done the 3 days before, because there's a qualification, right? And there's no difference, but there's cameras. That's all about it. Do exactly the same. Don't feel like you want to play for the cameras, but let the cameras work for you. When they feel like they want to have a different angle, then make them do the angle, right? Do your things and just smash it down there. And once I realized that, and there's actually no difference to the days before, it was a completely different ballpark. And from then on, I actually enjoyed being on TV and hitting balls on TV. So it's always, for me, it's always going through situations, feel the situation, and then realize to enjoy that situation, because especially when you hit a bad ball, you can always approach that from a different angle and say like, hey, now I hit a bad ball or whatever, or I missed that putt. Now it's a challenge for me. I can beat that challenge to not make that suppress me, but rather challenge me to hit another good shot. Right. So that's kind of the mindset I try to use in a tournament. And I mean, there's always different situation that's going to be pop up, but it's an experience, and it's definitely not the last tournament you've played.
So it sounds to me like almost like a veteran entrepreneur or investors that come. Your experience has given you the ability to change your sometimes negative mindset into a positive one. I guess the question for me then is, do you feel like you've now that you've kind of maybe not mastered, but like gained this skill, do you feel like you can also apply it in your personal life with, I don't know, your family, friends, maybe like business with your team or something? Can you maybe share an example where you have done that?
Yeah, so actually, what I've learned is actually the positive mindset, and I still have a lot to learn. You said it, I have not mastered that at all, right? I still got a long way to go, but I think I'm on a good path. And actually, keeping that positive mindset basically transfers to all parts of my life, to be honest. Yeah, it's if it's my marriage, right, with my wife, is amazing, because both of us, we always focus on the positive sides and the experiences we make, rather than looking at what went wrong and why it's terrible from now on, right? Rather look at what kind of experience we've made and what's good about what happened wrong, maybe, right? And that's what we discuss a lot, and it helps a lot as well. And wherever I look at, keeping that positive mindset and see downsides or failure as an experience always helps. If it's business, marriage, friends, whatever, looking at a downside and sticking to it in a negative way is always wrong.
Have you always been positive, or is it something, a skill that you learned? And
I guess no, not at all. So when I look back at my school time, actually back like 20 years ago, uh, I guess I had to learn that negativity is something I shouldn't strive for, because I felt like back in the days it was kind of sexy to be emotional and negative and everything. Oh, the Germans really love to do, right? And all of a sudden, I think it started when I started to play basketball on a competitive level, like at the age of 17, 18, maybe, because I realized in a competitive mode, you've when you're down like 12 points and it's 4 minutes to go, and you start to become negative in any way, you've already lost. There's no way you can still win, but it's still 4 minutes. You're down, yeah, but I mean, challenge accepted. Let's turn this around. And I guess when I have or we as a team achieved that a couple of times during my basketball career, I realized that's actually the way to go, and it's actually kind of a cool challenge to do so, instead of just, well, giving the game away.
how, going back to original question of the whole business and marketing, so obviously you've learned a lot in I would say your normal life versus your athlete life. Although your athlete life is now your new normal, but can you give more practical applications that you actually learned from maybe textbooks or something like that, or your actual job, where you like not maybe specifically applied it to your sport but the business of your sport? So you have to become, as an athlete, you have to have a personal brand, like agents, all that stuff. Like, what are some practical applications you've learned from textbooks that helped you navigate, where you thought like, okay, if I hadn't learned that in a book, I wouldn't have known at all?
Well, the number one is actually knowledge is power. So the deeper you dig into something, or if you really want to master something, you really want to find out everything about a topic, you got to do your research, and you got to do it by yourself. No one's going to do it for you. So that's what I have experienced lots of times. I mean, if it's looking at a golf club, right, and I'm building golf clubs myself in the meanwhile, because that's actually my working tools, so to speak. And without the knowledge how to build such things, how the specs are and everything, I would have never been this far in my professional golfing or long drive career, right? So once, what I figured is, if you really want to achieve something, whatever you're looking at, if it's business, if it's family, if it's relationships, the more you know about it, the more you get to know about it, and the less you get distracted from that, the more successful you're going to be. So when I decided to do long drive, for example, I really wanted to find out everything that's there. So it's not like, because some people say like, okay, let's go to this event and I'm going to try and well, let's see how it goes. That was not my attitude. My attitude was, all right, I'm good at this. So let's go and really become the best, right? What do I need to know? And then I read a lot of books. There's not a lot of books on long drive, but there's a lot of books on speed training, for example,
What
from
kind
other
of
sports.
books can you also recommend?
Yeah, well, there's one book that's called Speed, Power, and Athleticism. That's actually a drill book for NHL players, right? And there's so many drills in there, and that's the very basis for speed training. And that's where I started off, right? That's where I read the very basis for what I had to do, because everything we do, whatever it is, has been done in some way, done or thought before. We do not have to invent the wheel or reinvent the wheel, but we maybe have to add some spikes to it or put it on a different rim or whatever, right? You have to adapt it or manipulate it so it works for you. But in essence, it's actually knowledge is power. So the deeper you want to dig into your topic, the more you got to find out about it.
How are you handling your marketing? I wanted this as a specific question because we've had multiple athletes on. I find your Instagram one of the most interesting ones that we had to discover. How obviously Instagram isn't the only thing you do, but tell us a little bit about your marketing, how you handle it, the strategy behind it, your thoughts behind it, and why you even started doing it. Because I know a lot of athletes that came on our podcast, Olympians and everything that we had, they don't have like an Instagram or something like that.
Yeah, so I started to focus on Instagram when I was actually checking for information myself, because you can gather so much information and so many tiny bits from different athletes to copy stuff. Like I post myself, right? I post so many drills I'm doing myself, and I'm absolutely certain that some people pick them up and reuse them or add them to their spectrum, right? And I did exactly the same thing in the very beginning. I probably had like 25 followers, and I was looking at all these athletes' profiles to find out more about long drive, right, and how to train for it. And then I felt like, okay, I guess it would be a good way to have a personal account and just kind of share my journey, right? Because the very first account I had was actually a product account, which was called Punchline Golf, because that was the very first brand I started with a buddy of mine. And what we're doing were products, golf products like tees and gloves and all these kinds of things in a cool way, because what we wanted to do is we wanted to rejuvenate golf, because golf is still very traditional, and actually the prejudice is it's for old people, right? And rich people, obviously. And we wanted to break that a little bit. So that's when I started this brand account. And a couple of months later, when I started my journey as a long driver, I felt like, okay, it might be a cool idea to simply log my progress, right? And it was also cool for me to do so because I had all my swings in there and everything. And all of a sudden, I got quite a good engagement and lots of DMs that were like, hey, what were you doing here? And here's a little tip for you and blah, blah. And I really, that I felt like that community is really growing and people are very helpful, especially in that area. And yeah, and the more I was doing it, the more content I could create, and the deeper I was digging into it, the more I was sharing that information, that all of a sudden, because it was actually a platform for me to log all that information, that all of a sudden people were interested in marketing that or using that. And then I felt like, okay, it seems like I was marketing myself all the time without knowing. So it just happened. It was a byproduct.
Do you feel like the Instagram algorithm changes that happen
Oh
every
yeah,
so often that they screwed you over sometimes?
yeah, they did. So especially with videos and especially the new Instagram Reels algorithm, I think changed a little bit as well. Then you have times, especially depending on the content I post, that my story views are way down, and the other day they're way up again. So I have not really experienced any like I don't know what the algorithm is doing, to be honest with you, because sometimes it's this way, sometimes it goes that way. I've not seen any correlations. So well, but that's the way it is, right? That's how Instagram uses their technology. And well, it's a fair way, I guess, to yeah, make more money on their side, right? So because eventually I guess it's all about them selling paid ads. But I think as long as you do well, and as long as you keep going, people will stay attracted to it. People will. And I mean, sometimes it's not too motivating to be honest with you, when you see your story views at half the amount it's been a week ago, and you feel like that content is actually better, but then the other week they're up again. So you should simply, when you do Instagram, you should simply stick to the positives again. So it is what it is. You cannot change it. You can just adapt to and stick to all the rules you see out there and all the recommendations. But eventually, and I'm looking quite a bit into this, even if you stick to it and you do everything perfectly, you feel like you do it perfectly, there's no guarantee. Instagram's got the entire control.
Have you looked into other platforms that you are interested in shifting away a little bit your audience from Instagram?
Yeah, I was doing a bit of YouTube, especially during the times of the mole show, right? Because I felt like a minute or let's say content under 3 to 4 minutes is not enough to spread what I want to say, right? Because I had quite a lot to say after that show, and I did that on YouTube, and I did a couple of training videos as well on YouTube and so on. But I was really, so I feel like Instagram still remain to be my primary platform, definitely. But I've not looked into different platforms like TikTok, for example. I'm not doing that. I've never done Snapchat and all these platforms. So I feel like Instagram is still the number one, and then there's YouTube obviously as well, and Facebook obviously. I was doing Facebook as well, but I think I didn't log on for a year or something.
Well, were you doing like Facebook videos or just posting on Facebook?
Oh, what? I'm not posting at all. So sometimes what I do is I so I redirect I repost my
Yeah,
Instagram content
yeah, I
right
get it.
through to Facebook as well. So I simply tick that button. But um I feel like Facebook is so the audience on Facebook is quite a bit old in the meanwhile.
Do you think, I mean, considering you just started 3 years ago, I can imagine that's like just for some athletes. So you're a young athlete in that sense. Do you think when young athletes start, social is crucial nowadays, or do you feel like they can get away with just traditional media of journalists, press, and stuff like that?
Oh, definitely. So, I know all these different these different opinions. Some athletes feel like it's too much for them because they want to focus on practice, they want to focus on whatever, but don't want to focus on social media. Then I would recommend them get a team around you, get your brother do it or someone else, because the first thing people will do when they check on you nowadays, they don't Google, they search for you on Instagram. And the number one question you get from a sponsor when they potentially want to work with you, well, how big is your following on Instagram? And I mean, it's absolutely, especially in the golf world, more and more and more. But uh, especially because I feel like the view or the opportunity the idea of social media for companies, for big companies, is always a bit delayed to what's actually happening. So right now they're focusing on followers, like total followers, right? In probably, or in the meanwhile, they're focusing on engagement rate as well. But what they should focus way more on is the content itself, right? And I feel like the more we do on social media, the more athletes do on social media, the more companies focus on social media, the more they will find out about it, and the more important it will be for them eventually. So I guess what, independent of what sport you're doing, start an Instagram channel, and even if you're only posting every 3 days or whatever, keep doing it, and make your brother do it, make your sister do it, or your girlfriend. There has to be something on there, because it's absolutely crucial to have a platform for yourself. You can also make statements, for example. So what I did, there was one crucial thing in the US on Golf Channel. I was once doing this. So I was looking at the camera and I was playing against Kyle Berkshire, and I didn't have too good of a set. And I was doing this right into the camera. That means one and done. That's what I meant, right? And what they showed later on in the broadcast was this. And the German and the German standing there doing this, right? But what I actually did was one and done, right? And they only showed this. And yeah, it was pretty good for me to have a social media platform then to make a statement, right? Because yeah, the press obviously loved that.
That's one of those things where it's like, well, fake news pops up. It's really bad.
Absolutely. And well, it's always independent of the marketing. It's always good to have a platform for yourself to spread the word, right? Because you can always call the newspaper and say, like, please print this or that statement from myself. But it's way quicker. And I mean, an entire country, the USA, has been run by Twitter, basically, right? Over the last couple of
True.
years.
Do you feel like the media in the US is different than in
Oh,
Europe?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
How?
Absolutely. So I feel like all the media, especially in Germany, I don't know too much about the other media in for example, Portugal or wherever, but I feel like it's pretty neutral. So there's no different TV channels that might be more conservative or less conservative or very liberal or whatever. In the US, that's the complete opposite. So the opinions on these channels are very much based on yeah, what the background of that channel is. And I don't think we have that in Germany.
But so when you're like doing interviews, you just said obviously in America. I can imagine like what you experienced in America with them like thinking you're doing some salute. I mean, in Europe we have anti-slandering rules. So like if somebody would just run that without your permission, they would just I don't know, like you'd be able to sue them, but in America, I feel like they can just get away with it. How do you compare
Maybe.
those things?
Maybe. I mean, they're they're also pretty strict on all swear words, right? So they beep out all the swear words in the US. They don't too much on in Germany, but I mean that's been a live broadcast, right? If that guy, there's like 6 cameras, and exactly in this moment he was switching from one camera to the other camera because he was seeing I was doing something. It's pretty tough to sue them, right? And I mean, they didn't show it like, look what this guy was doing. It was just a snapshot, right? But people saw it, right? And they saw it again in the replay and again and again and again. So it was pretty good. I could make that statement. But yeah, I think in terms of legal issues, in terms of suing TV channels, I have no idea. Never been there.
Well, let's hope you'll never get there either.
Hopefully, yeah.
I really wanted to cover this before, like moving on, but you talked about obviously your nutrition and exercise, and we went into this whole business avenue now. I'd like to revisit the whole nutrition and exercise and how it has changed for you. We had the last podcast, we had an Olympian on, and we were talking for like an hour just about this whole nutrition thing, because it changes. I think when you're walking through life like normal and then you become an athlete, it becomes a really big focus. How has it become a focus for you, nutrition? How has it changed? Did it change? Did you have experts helping you with that? Can you explain more?
Yeah, so I mean, my nutrition was pretty good and healthy from probably um, third grade, right? Because my parents were very strict on my diet, and there was no chocolate at home. We had no gummy bears, no nothing. So
Really?
I was used to eating the healthy stuff, right? And I liked it, and I still do. But what actually changed is once I got into the whole fitness world at the age of 17, 18, because I was working on my physique to be more competitive in basketball, I actually started to track my calories. I actually started to track my macros. So I got more into how much of what, right? But it was never like I had to cut out this and that because I was eating too much chocolate, because I actually never had too much of those. So I'm pretty used to that, and I don't crave it either because I don't know how it is to eat a lot of it. So I actually enjoy eating healthy, and I also like to try out new fancy recipes and whatnot. So that's actually the baseline, right? So I know it's a lot harder for others who are used to eating very unhealthy and very sweet. And for them, it's a lot harder to actually make the change and switch to a very healthy diet. So that's a very jump off basis, because it's not been too hard for me to, I didn't have to adapt too much. But what's changed for me is timing. I, the food timing, especially during peak week. So when I'm running into a tournament, is the most important part, because a lot of people tell you that you shouldn't eat carbs after 6 p.m. and stuff, right? For me, it's the complete opposite. So what I'm doing before an event is I'm loading a lot of carbs for dinner. So I'll eat a lot of rice, for example, right? And obviously also protein and some greens and vegetables. But the major part is carbs. And that's because I want to load up overnight and actually fill all my cells to be the best the day after, right? To be the strongest the day after. So it's actually not about the carbs in the morning. It's about the carbs in the evening you then digest and use for the tournament. So that's the whole idea about it. Then obviously you shouldn't eat too close before your starting time, right? So when you, don't know, start at 10 a.m., you shouldn't have your last meal at 9 a.m., obviously, right? You should have at least 4 hours between the start and your last meal, and that should be a proper one. So that's what I figured, and that's what actually changed a lot.
I want to cover your parents and your household. I've dreamed about people doing this. I've discussed with, if I had children, how I would want to raise them, thinking of some dreamland with no chocolate for my children, because obviously I'm eating constantly and it's really hard to kick off. So can you tell me about what it was like? I feel like if you didn't have chocolate inside the house, you'd be tempted when you would go to friends or something. Or if you would see it at school, you'd probably like would I don't know, like would almost go for the chocolate like crazy, overload.
Well, for some reason, I was always more focused on the fat foods like pizza and stuff. I was not craving chocolate too much or sweets. It was always about the cheese and all of that, right? I didn't get back home too much, right? But actually, I wasn't too focused on chocolate. And um, I don't know why that is. I mean, obviously, I had some chocolate here and there and gummy bears and all these sweets, but I didn't like it too much. I don't know why that is, but it was not like, oh my God, I need some chocolate because I'm not getting it at home. It was like an automatic. I don't know. I can barely explain.
Nice, interesting. I always assumed like if a child from a household without chocolate would see chocolate somehow it'd go crazy. But I guess what you're saying right now is just you didn't even have a memory attached to chocolates, positive or something like that. And so for you, it didn't really matter if you saw chocolates. Whereas for me,
Yeah.
my child is pretty much chocolate.
Yeah, especially I mean, still today when I'm grocery shopping, like when I see all these sweets and everything, I just walk by it because I don't even realize it's there. It's just, I mean, it's the last path you need to take to go to the checkout, right? But you, I mean, I've never thought about um, don't know, buying stuff. It's just like it's there. I know it's there, but I don't realize it too much. So it's actually interesting. Never thought about it because it doesn't play too much of a role in my life.
Nice. That's good to know. So it is possible. Okay, then that was nutrition. How about supplements? What type of supplements did you start using as an athlete, or were changed, or did you use before? Could you tell about that?
Yeah, so the very first thing, obviously did, and most people do, was protein powder, if you call that a supplement, right? Because it's simply protein in as a powder, right? So that's not really a supplement, but some people consider it a supplement. So that's how I started off to actually match my protein intake, right? And I usually use it in my cereal in the morning with nuts and oats and some oat milk and fruits. So that's my usual breakfast. And I use protein powder to actually get some protein in the very morning, and I started doing that in the very beginning already when I started doing fitness. And I don't know when I started doing that, but maybe when I was 21 or 22 for the first time for basketball reasons. I started using creatine during the season. So not in the off season. I was cycling off for the off season always, but I used it during the season. And I guess that helped me a lot to actually stay fit throughout the whole season and to keep my energy levels up because creatine is actually a natural ingredient you find in meat as well. But if you want to take like 5 grams of creatine, what I do every day, I would have to eat like 1.5 kilos of meat, right? And as I do not eat a lot of meat at all, I usually have one meal with meat a month, actually, because I don't like meat too much. I mean, it's okay, but actually the reason for me not eating that much meat is because the quality of most meats from the supermarket is very poor.
Yeah, they're
So
quite horrible.
yeah, terrible. So when I'm actually getting a very good piece of meat, an organic one somewhere at the restaurant, or someone invites me over for dinner or whatnot with an amazing piece of meat, I love it. I eat it. But usually back home in my fridge, there's no meat at all, not at all.
Have you checked out these websites that sell grass-fed pieces of meat? So I know in the Netherlands, and I think in Germany they have that too. In the Netherlands, it's literally like buyacow.nl, and
yeah,
then
it's
you
cool.
you
Yeah.
can literally get like a grass-fed cow. Don't they have something like that in
Yeah,
Germany?
and once the entire cow is sold, it's been slaughtered, right? I guess it's something like that. Yeah, we have something like that, but I've never tried it actually. Maybe I have to have a look into it. But I eat quite a lot of fish. But what I actually like is lentils and beans and all that stuff because I like the taste of it, right? And those are so versatile. You can eat, you can make cakes with it, or all different kinds of things, eat them raw. So there's endless possibilities with these things, and I love them, right? And yeah, the creatine, we were talking about creatine. I would actually not recommend to use creatine for a long, long time because it can be very harmful for your kidneys. I mean, there's lots of studies out there that say it's absolutely no problem, and some of them say it does harm your kidneys, but it definitely increases muscle performance, and that's why I use it. But I don't use it for a very long time, and I always cycle it off again. And because I don't want to eat
How do you cycle it off, and what is not a long time for you?
a long time is more than 6 months. I usually try to cycle off after 3, have a period of 1 month at least to recover, and then go back on it again. Usually, right now, I don't use it. Like when now is November, I think I cut it off in no, I cut it off early this season because it's COVID. Already in June. In June already, I stopped taking it because it was crystal clear that the season is not going to happen. Right?
And so, how much per day do you take of
Five
creatine?
5 grams every day. That's like a half a tablespoon.
Okay, yeah, clear.
Yeah, and I just mix it with water, drink it, and that's about it. So nothing fancy, nothing crazy. I always use the same creatine monohydrate, so it's the purest form you can have. It's got the Crea Pure sticker on it, so that's the purest form you can get it in. And yeah, as I said, I wouldn't recommend to load it in the very beginning because some people also recommend to load it up and take 20 grams a day for a week or so, and then 10 and then 5. No, I would not recommend that. Just take your 5 grams. Maybe 3 is also enough if you're not as tall and not as big, but take it consistently over a period of 2 months, then check where you are, and then check also if it actually increases your performance, right? You can check that by, for example, the weight you if you made huge jumps in weightlifting or in club hit speeds, etc. But it can definitely help your process of getting faster and stronger. But there's also non-responders out there that do not respond that well to creatine. So if it doesn't make sense for you, don't take it. For me, it does make a lot of sense. I feel a crazy difference. Seriously, it's crazy for me how good I respond to creatine, and I always notice a big difference after an intake of 1 week already. So that's why I'm pretty confident as soon as I get back onto it, I'm getting a bit faster as well. So that helps a lot. And that's actually the only, in my opinion, the only supplement that really works and makes a difference, because the other supplements, like, sure, vitamin D is great. I mean, there's other sources for vitamin D, and whatever, magnesium is great, but there's other sources for magnesium, right? Yeah, no problem. But creatine, to get a lot of creatine, I would have to eat a lot of meat, and that's why I supplement it.
Any other big supplements you'd recommend?
Yeah, so what I mean, I got all these supplements, right? I got like the magnesium, I got the CBD oils, I got the vitamin D. What else do I have up there? Calcium and all these things, but it's nothing I take on a regular basis, right? It's not like I take that stuff every day. I take it as I need it. For example, now during winter times, it would make sense to supplement a bit of vitamin D, right? Because you don't have that much sun anymore on your entire body. That absolutely makes sense. And I guess I have to get into onto that over the next couple of weeks. But it's not something I would recommend to take it over the whole year. And I mean, I don't recommend to take creatine over the whole year as either, but it makes sense because it actually enhances the performances.
Then, a very interesting question, obviously, because you're an athlete, so I tend to ask athletes that. But exercise, how does your exercise look like? Obviously, you've had two different sports that you attended, basketball and long drive now. How did it compare when you weren't doing sports to when you were doing basketball to when you're doing now what you're doing?
It's still 80% the same. And I guess that's why I was so successful that quickly in long drive, because things I did for basketball also helped the long drive sport, because both sports are actually pretty explosive sports. So you need a lot of explosive power. So what helps is jumps, for example. Jumps are amazing, sprints are amazing, and anything you do explosively is amazing, right? And I was doing that for basketball already, and was sticking to it for a lot of exercises for long drive as well. What I added to my regimen was rotational exercises, for example, mat ball throws. That's just one example, or rotational jumps. I adapted a little bit, but the very basis of my training is still the basic compound exercises, because seriously, there's no magic exercise you can do to become the best. These basic exercises and these compound moves have worked for like 60, 70, 80 years plus, and all the amazing athletes out there do them. So why would you change them? Always stick to the basics. When you do the basics in a good way, you're already at probably like 60 70% of the work done. So basic exercises, I mean, I'm doing deadlifts, I'm doing squats, pull-ups, shoulder press, bench press, and probably also for long drive in that order in terms of importance, right? Because all the power in your golf swing comes from the ground up. So what we actually utilize is the ground force, because we stomp down on the ground, and the entire force works throughout our entire body, and then we, with our core and the rotation, we only transfer that force to the golf club. That's how it actually works, and that's why the lower body is so important. And yeah, when I look at timing or training cycles, so what I do during off season, right now it's a bit of a hassle because in Germany all the gyms are closed and we're on lockdown. So yeah, I mean, I got my weights back here. I do all these body weight exercises, but obviously it's not as good as gym work, but I'm doing what I can do. And I did get a barbell here. I got some dumbbells, but not as much weight as I have in the gym, obviously. But in terms of cycles during off season, so from, let's say, late September to late January. I'm working on in a higher rep range. So basically, building that foundation, building the muscle to later, from let's say early February onwards till end of April, working on on lower reps, higher weights, more explosive moves. So the closer I get to the season, the higher the intensity gets. So basically, the idea is to build that muscle during off season and then utilize it and actually use different techniques to make your nervous system tell your body to go faster, because in the golf swing there's always two different things. You have an engine, which is your muscles, right, and your muscle mass, but you also have to push down the gas pedal to actually accelerate, and that gas pedal is actually your nervous system. And in long drive and golf we have different speed training techniques to actually tickle that nervous system to make your body go faster, and that's the two ways.
How does your week look like? You mentioned all these exercises. I'm assuming you're not doing them all on the same day,
No.
or so how does your week look like?
So usually I go to the gym 4 times a week, and I have one day for lower body work, one day for pull work. So that means I'm working on the back side of my body. One for push work, which means I'm working on the front side of my body and my shoulders. And one day for accessory work like jumps and sprints. So explosive moves only. And depending on the time of the year and depending on how I feel like, I do that workout prior to my swing session or after my swing session. For example, when I go all out on a leg session, it doesn't make sense to hit balls 2 hours later. It's probably the other way around. Then I hit balls first and then I go to the gym. So it depends. But sometimes when I'm doing sprints and jumps combined with a bit of speed training, swinging speed sticks, for example, it absolutely makes sense to hit after that, because that training session usually doesn't exhaust you, but it energizes you to do the speed session, also hit balls. So it very much depends.
How long is your gym session?
Well, usually anything between 45 minutes and 90 minutes.
So that's actually not pretty long. So that's not like
No,
you're 2, 3 hours in the gym or something.
no. I guess these guys are that long in the gym are spend most of their time on their phone. Uh, that's so. When I'm talking about 45 to 90 minutes, I'm talking about 45 to 90 minutes work. So we work when we're in the gym, right? I mean, I do have my phone with me and I do have my tripod with me, but only to turn on the camera here and there to capture some stuff. Yeah. But I would never post it on Instagram in the gym, right? Because it kills so much time. You go to the gym, do your workout. When you do 90 minutes of my workout, you should be either exhausted or you should be super energized for the next session, depending on the workout. But yeah, some people who spend like 3 or 4 hours in the gym, I doubt that they have a very efficient workout. Can be effective, but it's not efficient.
How do you train? Do you have a personal trainer, or how does that work with someone, setting world records? I'm assuming you have multiple personal trainers, or you do everything alone and you record yourself. How do you do it?
Yeah, so I'm doing most of the training myself, but obviously I do have a team around me with a physio and guys I reach out to just exchange ideas, right? So we have a small group of people who are all looking at the same goal, right? Becoming faster athletes. There's one power lifter in there, one PGA pro, and myself. And we're constantly exchanging new ideas and try out new things. But when I started off, I mean, with that experience I made over the last 10 years, it's, to be honest with you, in training, especially when it's about the very basic things, I guess most of it has been explored, because there's been a lot of research already in training methodology and everything. And I'm actually 80% of what I'm doing is still the same I did 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it works. And that's why I stick to that.
How did you find these other athletes and got that group going?
On Instagram.
Seriously, just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
DM them and that's it?
Yeah, we all of a sudden, I mean, I saw all these posts, and they saw me doing these things, and well, it just happened naturally, right? It just happened. I don't know when was that, like maybe 1.5, 2 years ago, when we were first texting. Yeah, it just happened, right?
Nice. So just like that, that's you're really using Instagram properly, huh?
Well, it's a social network. We should be, we should socialize on there. It's not about posting and leaving. Instagram is about using the time you spend there as effectively and efficiently as possible, right? So scrolling through a news feed is not a very effective way to use Instagram. Scrolling through a newsfeed is killing time when you're bored, maybe, but it's not too many times a year I'm bored.
Yeah. We're slowly starting to wrap up, but we have a
Yeah.
couple of segments still on our show that we usually ask our guests. The first one is our crash and burn segment. So these are about your biggest failures, and the question then is, what are some of the biggest failures that you didn't expect, and also what you learned from it? So biggest failures throughout your entire career that you didn't expect, and especially like what are the practical lessons that you learned from it?
I guess looking at long drive, my biggest failure was probably when I didn't make it through first round at my home club, because I actually brought an event of the European Tour to my home club here in Munich. And I played the event. I actually helped setting everything up on site. And I didn't make it through first round because I was hitting it terribly and didn't find the grid. That's what it was, right? And yeah, I dropped out and had to watch someone else win it at my home club. So that was terrible, and that was probably one of the biggest failures in my sports career this far, because there were guys qualifying that are half as fast as myself. So like seriously slow guys, almost like amateurs, who beat me that day technically. And yeah, that was a huge bummer. But the the next day was still terrible. The day after was also still terrible. But the week after was the next event. And where was that? Because that's already like 2.5 years ago. I guess that was in England, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was in England. Could have been Scotland, but it was England, I guess. And I came second in that one. And so it was not a form that was pointing at the wrong direction. It simply, I had to realize sometimes you cannot control everything, right? Sometimes you just have a shitty day. It happens, right? You have to accept it. You have to move on, learn from your mistakes, analyze if you did anything substantially wrong, anything structural wrong, or if there was any mistakes you've actually done, or was it just a couple of bad breaks and you have to move on. And I realized, to be honest, you could get, these things can get into your head, right? You can feel like, wow, something's wrong with my swing, because the swing is crucial for golf and long drive, obviously. But I didn't, and I just moved on. And sometimes that's just the right thing to do.
That is pretty valuable to realize as well. Also, from your answer, what I'm gathering is you're very analytical as to how you approach your own, athletic career. You're not just like you said, showing up, smoking some cigars, and eating some
Yeah.
McDonald's. It's like you're reading the books, you're analyzing yourself, you're reflecting a lot. Do you have like specific people around you that make you reflect more, ask the right questions?
Yeah, I do. I'm working with a sports psychologist as well. So we, in the very beginning, we were speaking like every 2 weeks or so. In the meanwhile, it got a lot less, especially during this year, because, well, we were talking in the very beginning and now a couple of weeks back, because it was at some point it was clear that we're not going to have a season. But dealing with that was tough too. And we realized that I simply have to move on. But back in the days when I got into the sport and I still had to learn how to prepare for all these events, I was in constant contact with her. So it's a she. And she gave me a lot, actually, to achieve all these successes I had. And she got me even more into these preparing and simulating and visualizing than I've been before. So I was already doing it, but she actually, her um, reaction to what I was doing and how to amplify it, even yeah, kind of confirmed what I was already doing, and I was digging even deeper into it. So yeah, got a lot of help there.
Well, what do you talk about with a sports psychologist? How is that different than a normal psychologist? What are the topics you breach on, and how do they actually help you?
For example, what we do have in long drive is a pre-shot routine. So usually, so that's what I'm doing. I step behind my ball and I look at the target I want to hit, right? I look at the direction I want to hit. And this whole process, teeing up a ball, stepping behind the ball, address the ball, and hit the ball, takes roughly 12 to 14 seconds. And there's a lot of room for thought in these 12 to 14 seconds. And it's very crucial what you think during this time, and especially just before you take away the club, what's going to happen, right? And once you hit a couple of bad balls, when you've not experienced that a lot, you can get into this vicious circle and be out of sync and just have a bad set. That can happen. But actually, uh, in detail, talking about these 12 to 14 seconds is something a, let's say, normal psychologist has not done as many times as a sports psychologist specializing in golf or long drive, because this pre-shot routine is very crucial. I mean, there's different types of people. So what I usually do is I imagine the sound of the sweet spot of the club face, because I'm more acoustic focused than visually focused. But what some people also do is they step behind the ball and imagine the trace of the ball flying down there, right? There's all kinds of different types. And what we actually did in the very beginning is we try to figure out what is the most effective way for me to approach a ball and approach a set. So that's actually what we've been working on, and that's very, very detailed. So that is on a level of seconds just before I hit the ball, for example, and that's something someone who's never done it before or who's never analyzed it before cannot help you with.
So your sports psychologist is specifically focused on the niche of long drive or
No,
golf?
golf golf in general. So the pre-shot routine is always the same. So also in golf, these guys are doing pre-shot routines. So it's kind of the same. The surrounding is a little different because it's more adrenaline driven, right? And there's more crowds shouting. But to be honest with you, for me there's no difference, because I don't notice these people around me, because they're all yelling anyways, and I'm that focused, so it's not too much of a difference.
And then another segment that we have is obviously the show is called Impact Talks, but one of the questions that we always ask is around impact stories. So, what is the project that you worked on that had the biggest impact? And it could be anything throughout your entire career. It doesn't have to be only your sports career, of course.
The biggest impact on what? Can be anything?
Can be anything, yeah. You can define impact also in your own way. It's always interesting to hear how people interpret that.
Okay. I believe the whole process I've been going through is something. So as a European going over to the US and compete, there's only been one before that was very successful in the US. And setting up the European tour, the new European long drive tour in a new way is the biggest impact I had, because there's so much room for improvement and there's so much more for long drive in Europe that I hope that I can the impact I already had can be even amplified to grow the sport even more and grow it bigger and bigger, so it's going to be on TV in Germany. So I guess the first steps have been done, but there's a lot more to come, and that impact is already there, and now we got to push through it.
That's a nice one. Last question then, that I always want to ask is, what are you currently doing or learning that has nothing to do with the activity, like golf or long drive? Something completely unrelated that you're learning or doing, that you like to share with the audience.
So it's something my Instagram community doesn't know. So I don't know who's going to listen to this, but it's going to be a first timer. Preparing to become a dad. So
Congrats.
my wife is pregnant, and she's due end of February, so February 25th. So that's what I'm working on right now, and I already got a couple of books, and I haven't read a sentence yet, but I think I got to get into that. But yeah, the day before yesterday, I was building a bed. The week before, we got I think you call it a prem, right? Like we got a prem. Then like there's seriously tons of clothing we got and all that stuff. So I'm getting used to a complete new chapter of my life. So that has nothing to do with long drive, nothing to do with business, but it's one of the bright sides of the Corona pandemic.
How is it changing? Like, congrats, that's a huge deal. But how is it like changing everything in your life? Is it changing your mindset as well, you
Oh,
think?
absolutely. So it's been such a big boost, to be honest with you. So um, when I see that baby kick in, and when I feel it, and I know it's gonna be there in like 3 months time, it's such a motivation to keep going. It's such a motivation to become the best I can be in all terms, if it's business, if it's sports, and anything in between, because it's linked in my case. Because everything I do now is not only for me but for the whole family. So it's been a huge boost.
What kind of books did you buy for this chapter?
And
That's interesting.
I think it's called Daddy for Dummies. that's,
That's a good one.
that's the first thing I got, and the other one is called Papa Loading. Uh, so let's see. I don't know. I haven't read it yet. So actually, when I bought the Daddy for Dummies myself, and the Papa Loading is from my dad. He sent it to me. So let's see.
Is that the book he read or something, or was he
I don't.
the?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think he's just so proud to become a grandpa, and he was like, he thought it sounded funny, and it's read in a way, or it's written in a way that is very colloquial, right? So there's no studies in there or anything. It's just some dad probably writing a book.
There's a YouTube channel you should check out. I'm completely blanking on the name, but it's this Australian guy. I think it's called How to Dad. Super funny. He's explaining all these things about how to be a dad, except it's like comedy. It's really funny. I definitely check it out. Maybe last question that the audience always asks. And like, please go detailed with this. But what are like the top books that have helped you, and what you've learned from them?
Um, well, there's actually several, but to go into the very top has to do with what I said in the very beginning about simplicity. I read a book. It's called Essentialism. I'm actually missing the author right now. I have to check it up. But the cover is it's like a white cover with a lot of lines and a bit of mess in the very beginning, in the very middle. But it actually shows in a very nice way what we need to focus on and what's actually essential, because there's so much mess going on around us and so much we're focusing on that distracts us from our actual goal. And he shows in a very nice way with a lot of sketches and everything, what's actually essential and what we need to focus on, what actually has an impact and what the differentiator actually is, right? And that's essentialism. So it's also getting a little bit in, if I remember correctly, because that was like 2 years ago, 2.5, when I read that, because I had a lot of things happening in that during that time, because I was just about to quit my job, right? Because I was doing long drive as a side hustle, and I actually came to a point of time when I had a chance also financially to do long drive full time, right? And I had so much going on, so my days were so full, and I was working in this IT enterprise, and I was doing a lot of things that I didn't like too much, all these reportings, right? And all the stuff you don't like, that book really fit, because yeah, it's about essentialism and it's not about the weekly report.
How have you applied that to your game as
Yeah,
an athlete?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Because the also the golf swing is a very complex move, and also everything that's happening there is very complex. So you get, especially looking at high level tournaments, you have all these cameras, and you have the turf, you have the grid, you have the audience, but you got to focus on what's really essential. And in that exact moment, it's exactly the same you've done the day before. It's about the quick fix you do in your swing. You got to focus on this, you got to focus on that. It's actually exactly the same as I said before, and that perfectly applies to the whole essentialism idea.
I love it, and I think that's a great way to wrap up. Realizing how essential essentialism is,
Oh
and
yeah.
like keeping things simple. I think it's one of the things as we're growing as a team. I'm noticing focus and keeping things simple are becoming really essential as well. We started limiting the amount of people, or sometimes we have volunteers joining us. They can join specific teams, focusing on one thing. It really just covers that. I'm definitely going to check out that book. So I appreciate you mentioning it. But yeah, that was kind of it. I'm super excited that you came on. I could have talked for another hour with you, but it's good to wrap up, of course. Um, yeah, if you have anything to share with the audience, red carpets rolled out. Where can they find you? What do you have to share? Please tell the audience.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. It's at Martin Borgmeier. So what I share there is basically my everyday life around the sport of long drive. So it's a lot about equipment, it's a lot about training, a lot about drills, but also about my food here and there. So there's definitely a lot you like when you're a sports person or you're interested in sports or high performance, right? Because I believe if you want to achieve something and you work for it, you can go way beyond your limits you would think there is. So that's basically my message to you guys out there. Let's rock.
If you liked this episode, you can check out our most recent one here. And if you haven't already, make sure you click here to subscribe and see the next one. But if you're interested in more tips and tricks, then make sure to join our Facebook group, where you can find thousands of like-minded people and you get direct access and support to any business question